We also have Ergo still in here. A lot to talk about with Ergo coming up here shortly. $2.60 a day right now. I'm actually going to pull this up. Let me see if I can do this, because I did get this information just recently. Excuse the noises there. Regarding the soft fork. So I had asked for clearer details to cover on Ergo and their soft fork. So I do have that here. It was posted 3 hours ago by Armenio, and he is basically a community manager, and I talked to him on Telegram. So I got more information here for you guys. We're also going to post this in chat because it looks like nobody's seen it. So there you go. All right. So EIP 27 soft fork proposal. So the intent is soft forking Ergo emission. There are a lot of concerns about the emission being over in less than 6 years from now. The long-term sustainability of the short emission schedule is an inherent risk to the long-term viability of the Ergo network. The UTXO is seeing good growth, but due to the nature of storage rent, which charges a fee on unmoved UTXOs after 4 years, the viability of storage rent economy as a way to protect the long-term economic viability and security of the network is in question. We would like to create a system that offers economic incentives to miners in the short term while protecting the long-term crypto economic security of the network. Now, before we get into this is going to be put to a vote to miners. I'm in talks with the GetBlock, which is one of the bigger pools, as well as a few others for this, and we're getting all the information together, but it's going to take a little bit of time before I have all the information. What we have here is clarification on exactly what the soft fork will do. So principles: having unlimited emissions has given ETH tremendous flexibility in playing with its economic policy and network adjustments. Ergo is committed to the principle that the total supply must be preserved. Unfortunately, post non-outsourceable puzzles, the governance scheme has changed. The governance model shifted from a democratic model where individual miners vote to a representative model where mining pools vote. And this is what I kind of brought up initially, which was, and I think basically this entire clarification is a response to the original segment we had on this particular EIP. So I'm glad to see that what I'm reading is direct responses to our concerns. One being, of course, that because Ergo is no longer, one mining rig, one vote, or, one miner, one vote, and like no pools allowed to now pools allowed. If you went with the traditional voting scheme, the mining pools would have all the control and say, and the miners as individuals would not. So I think what they're talking about here is going to be proposing a mechanism that is going to allow individual miners to vote, which at the very least I think is something that I definitely approve of and am glad to see them doing. So I'm glad they're looking at resolutions for that. So we know that is not very efficient form of governance, as a select group of actors has massive representation. We have encouraged mining pools to poll individual miners, and as soon as we hear back from pools, we will be open and transparent about which pools are in favor and which are not. GetBlock, one of our community pools, has created a proof of vote POV voting mechanism, and I'm actually talking to GetBlock right now on this voting mechanism. We will get more information for you this week on how it's going to work exactly. So to know what needs to be done for this to take place, guys, it's going to be a 90% approval rate, which is a super majority. The governance model they are following is modeled on this following paper. Let's go ahead and look at what, yeah, so this was right. That's currently what they're on. I think we're aware of that. We've covered that in the WTF is Ergo. process. So emission and treasury emission are boxes created before the Genesis block and associated with corresponding contracts. This is part of the proof of no pre-mine and the associated monetary policy of the network. It is important to understand that the original emissions contract is still valid. It is simply interacting with a re-emissions contract that is collecting rewards to be used to extend the original emissions. Essentially what you're seeing is a contract on top of a contract to basically pull a portion of the block reward, just to give you guys an idea, to pull a portion of the block reward and put it into a contract that will then pay out miners for a longer period of time as opposed to it ending in 2026. Now, do I want to tell you? I do. I will tell you guys why I think this almost has to happen, and then we'll go from there. And one of the things I didn't realize really initially on, and I think we had even covered it though, was exactly how short of an emission cycle Ergo initially had, which is about like eight years, ending in 2026, or was it 6 years? 6 years. Anyways, 6 years, 8 years, really short. For example, like for comparison, Bitcoin doesn't end its emissions schedule until 2140. And so what does that mean? What has to happen on the network for that to be sustainable after 6 years? In 2026, what needs to be happening with the network for miners to be incentivized to continue to mine? And here's where we kind of like understand why this starts to be a thing, if you ask me. Yes, they're talking about storage fees, but one of the things that is true is if nobody's using the platform, then there will be no fees for the miners to collect in 6 years. And then based on the amount of miners, you know, that cut gets lower and lower. And if there's not a base block reward, then you risk essentially losing the security for the network in 6 years if you don't have enough users paying fees to compensate the miners. So I understand the economic problem here and the risk to the network from that perspective alone. And that's kind of what I see as being a huge problem just in general. Now, what I would have hoped for is that this would have been recognized either earlier on or at the very beginning of the project of like, oh yeah, like we have to have this amount of users before it's viable for us to only be paying miners out via like fees essentially, as opposed to a block reward. So you kind of can only cut the block reward down when there's enough users to incentivize the miners. And because of the short 6 year time frame on the emission schedule, kind of makes sense that it might not work. Just my thoughts in general. So take that for what you will. Does that mean that you change the contracts, the emission contracts? That's a hard debate that, you know, I think miners have to have regarding this project, because it's a social contract with the miners essentially saying like, we said that we would give you this much and now we're not. Technically, we're going to give it to you later though. I guess it's a little bit better than Ethereum, but it also means that something wasn't modeled right initially is what I feel like, if that makes sense. Which reduces confidence, right? So this EIP offers the following procedure for that, to resolve this emissions thing. Starting from block 699,393, first block of the 684th epoch, new emission rules, if approved, would be applied on top of the rules described in the Ergo white paper. Remember, this is not for sure happening. This will be a vote put into the miners, so to us. And hopefully I'm working enough to get this, you know, recognize that we want individual miner votes. And it looks like luckily we've gotten that. So for the community, I'm happy that it does look like we're moving in that direction. The current block reward is 66 ergs. The initial change would drop the mining reward per block by 12 ergs. Subject to approval, the block reward would be 66 minus 12, which is 54 ergs. That's the initial reduction. In simple terms, the initial reduction of 12 ergs is being put into a box where it will pay miners after the initial emission period is complete. So that would be in 2026. So 66 old, 54 new block height, blah, blah, blah. And he goes through the math here. The original emissions hit the zero block at 2,080,800. The proposed re-emission soft fork creates an extended period of block reward at 3 erg. There is an interactive graph available on ergo.watch that models the original emission and proposal. So you can see that here, right, where you would essentially be going up, up, up. Where is it? Right. There's the emission coming down. Is that right? The chart's not really interactive, is it, right now? It's interactive down here. Okay, I'll have to look at reading this specifically, and I will get information on exactly how to read it for you guys and then try to compare it later. So in the future, it's possible to create a soft fork that requires storage rent to be collected into the re-emission contract to potentially smooth payment and extend the block rewards into the future. ERG cannot be burned in the conventional manner miners are accustomed to due to storage rent. Any future burns can be directed into the re-emission contract, potentially stabilizing the re-emission at 3 erg. The goal of this proposal is to secure the crypto economic security of the chain long-term to create a sustainable ecosystem that incentivizes miners. This is what I was talking about. This is why they're doing it. I think that what they are seeing on their models is that they will not scale enough to the amount of users they need to compensate the miners enough to continue to secure the network. Therefore, they need some sort of block reward after 2026 to help incentivize miners. And I think that's what we're seeing here, basically. So to give you guys an idea, that seems like exactly why to me. We believe that the governance in a proof-of-work system should be representative of the opinions of miners. This is a part of why the threshold for soft power is set at 90%. Due to the previous hard fork, the governance model changed, which shifted power to mining pools. This is not ideal, but we will try to be transparent about how to vote. Excuse me. The consensus among miners and those that support our ecosystem is important. Developers have proposed updates in the past that have been rejected. This is a part of governance and decentralized management. If EIP 27 is rejected, we will talk to the community and propose alternatives in the future. All right, so let's talk about this because this is a problem. It is a problem. Here's the thing. It's a problem for the miners too, the current emissions policy or whatever proposal, or the original emissions, the current one, the one that's in right now, basically has the potential for the miners to run out of all of it, the network drop off, not have anybody mining it, fees not going to miners, the miners drop off, and you have a dead coin, and everything you mined is worth nothing. That's literally, like, as it sits right now, what the problem could be. What resolves that problem is the amount of people that start utilizing the network. Okay? The problem there is, according to their models, as far as I understand, which they can only see out 4 years, something like that, they wouldn't have enough to compensate as far as just fees to go ahead and pay the miners out. So from the miners' perspective, I do have to say that if you want to mine Ergo and you're going to mine it and hold it, and you're going to hold it for long term, you do have that potential of basically Ergo ending up being a dead coin because the initial emissions model is flawed. Now, here's where things get extra tricky, because when we talk about previous changes to monetary policy, especially when it comes to compensating miners, where we run into a you shouldn't be doing that. The problem I'm seeing here, though, is that we have a problem. I think it's broke no matter what, because you don't want to be changing emissions in general, right? You don't want to be doing that and making monetary policy changes if you can help it. But I feel like it just started off bad. I think that a 6-year an emission cycle that ended in 2026 was too young, and I think that should have been spotted earlier on. Now, maybe they were expecting enough network traffic through the Cardano Oracle, etc., to make it worth mining after that. And that could have been what they were modeling after. I really don't know. Now, what I'm going to be covering on the channel for you guys is how you can vote and you can make that decision. Here is what I would like to see in general, though. I would like to see a different, I think personally, and I'll talk to them about this, I would like alternatives to be softly proposed, just basic alternatives proposed before miners vote on EIP 27. And the reasoning is maybe somebody has a better idea of how to handle this. Does this need to be solved? Because for me, I feel like this needs to be solved if I'm looking at it from the economic portion of it, specifically like maintaining network security while also compensating miners fairly. And I don't think it works right now. So voting against EIP 27 feels like voting for the coin to die in 2026 to a certain extent. But if we have alternatives, or at least preliminary alternative ideas, then we would be able to say, okay, I'm voting against 27 because I think that there's a better alternate idea. And this is kind of where I'm at a loss as far as it all goes. What are the things that I've enjoyed about Ergo, of course, is the amount of development. Of course, the Ergo DEX for the decentralized exchange was stood up really quickly and functions well. I've utilized the Ergo auction house for NFTs, and that's functioned well. So things are functioning well from the DeFi and the contract aspect and so on, as far as all that goes. However, we're running into, it feels like the exact same problems that Ethereum was running into. The difference being, luckily here, is you have a couple things going for it compared to Ethereum when we start talking about re-emissions or changing of the monetary policy. Number one being is that miners get the vote and they are working on individual miner votes. I think that is super important to point out, because that puts it leagues ahead of Ethereum, okay, as far as this goes in general. The other thing that it has going for it is a supply cap, meaning that Ethereum doesn't have a supply cap, Ergo does. So as far as the economics go, it's not like they're going to be printing an infinite or minting an infinite amount of ERG that is going to possibly affect your mining profitability in the future if you were holding, right? These are the benefits to Ergo versus Ethereum, and what sets this particular issue, right, the monetary policy, this re-emission issue, separate from what Ethereum was doing, which is let's have all the holders, the hodlers, the ICO investors vote on something that reduces mining rewards for miners. This is at least miners voting for it in general. And like I said, to clarify, I do feel like a vote for no on EIP 27 as it sits, if nothing else was put in place, would be almost voting for a dead coin. That being said, I think that there should be alternatives addressed and thought out before we just ham-fist in some sort of EIP right away. Hopefully that clears it all up and is objective as possible. I think that you can hear how reserved I am as far as like this project in general. It definitely isn't confidence inspiring. I would make that clear, but I do see the value in it, like we've talked about before, and I do see how it is intentionally being done in a manner that takes into account the miner's opinion. So those two things are definitely positives in my book from there. All right. So I have my reservations, but I also have the positives about the project. And I think I laid it out as best as I could. Now, none of this is financial advice. Also, make your own decision on how you vote for this. I'd like to hear you guys' opinions over here in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Morning Show every Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. Pacific and 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check out more clips here, or if you're interested in checking out the entire live show, you can check that out down here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.